Welcome back, everyone, to Neighbors in the Network. I'm James Pinedo, your host, and today we have a very special guest, Mark Cunningham. Mark, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, James. I'm looking forward to it.
I am too. I am too. How's the great state of Tennessee going today?
Well, we got some thunderstorm warnings, so not great. We actually have to, yeah, apparently there's going to be massive and potential flash flooding, so not as good as usual, but it's always beautiful here. So happy to live here.
Okay, well, gosh, stay safe. I know that those flash floods can be pretty. I live in Houston, so like tornadoes and hurricanes and things like that can get really bad, but I hear Tennessee can get pretty bad too. Is that right?
It is. I think Houston's worse, but yeah, we just get weird stuff. We can have hailstorms and then tornado warnings. So we got to get a little bit of everything, but not as bad as, kind of the South, and Houston's much worse, I'm sure.
Yeah, everything's trying to kill you here in Houston. You have the weather. It
The heat,
doesn't
yeah.
matter. Any case, so folks, Mark Cunningham is the Vice President of Strategy and Communications at the Beacon Center of Tennessee. As you could tell, we're talking about Tennessee. And he, in the words of Meredith, our wonderful, wonderful coworker here at SPN, Mark is one of the best advisor friends. He genuinely listens and really cares. He's insightful and always has great advice. So we're really excited to hear more about how Mark's journey led him to where he is now at the Beacon Center and understanding more about his path. So Mark, thank you again. And let's get started, shall we?
Absolutely.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about your background. Where'd you grow up? How did that shape you?
Yeah, well, first of all, I got to make sure I send Meredith that check after those nice words she said about me. So that was very helpful. Yeah, so I actually grew up. I live in Tennessee now, but I grew up in a town called Phoenixville. It's about 30, 45 minutes outside of Philadelphia. Middle class. My mom was a Catholic school teacher. My dad actually owns a trophy store. So I got a lot growing up there where I had a lot of friends who had more money than me. But we always made it work, and we always were able to. We had food on the table. And my parents, sometimes worked. My mom worked 2 or 3 jobs, like working at QVC overnight till 5 a.m. and then driving me to school. So I had parents who both worked really, really hard, and and then from there, I went to college at Marquette, which is in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and a great basketball tradition, and from there, I kind of got involved in kind of weirdly in this politics policy arena.
Wow. So like right out of college, or was it like, yeah.
It was right out of college. So, and it's funny because my goal, I wanted to be a sports radio host. That was always my goal. I had my own sports talk show in college. I loved it. It was funny that, I got all these, really famous college coaches. We interviewed like Mike Leach, who was at Texas Tech at the time. Matt Ryan, the quarterback. So we got all these cool people to talk to. Like that was my passion. And then I kind of looked at, how much money sports radio hosts make and how hard it is to break in. I said, that might not be where I want to go. So actually, yeah, my first job ever was it was working for the Republican Party of Pennsylvania for an election, which, I'm aging myself. So I guess that was 2010 at this point. So yeah, it's a long time ago, but it feels recent.
No, yeah, that's not that long ago, Mark. Don't that's not that long ago. That's so how I'm still kind of like jumping. So what was it though that really saw, okay, this is where I want to be back in college.
Yeah, so I think and it's funny that if I'm being honest with you, I didn't really know that's where I wanted to be. There's all
Okay.
these things I wanted to do. I had all of these interests, and I always really enjoyed politics, specifically from kind of the sports view of it. I like to see elections. I like to guess who's going to win. I cared about it. But what's interesting is I always kind of leaned right, and I worked for the Republican Party, and that was the year that actually Pat Toomey was elected and Governor Corbett, and both Republicans. So it was a big Republican sweep. But it was actually kind of around that time, and I managed campaigns for a few years after, where I kind of realized that that's when I felt like policy was where I wanted to be in instead of politics. I felt like I was working for this team essentially, but there was a number of things I disagreed with on there. And while I thought that was the better option of two, I think it really kind of made my passion for the issues stand up, because I said, what, I think that Republicans are great on this, and this, but I mean, I actually think Democrats are really good on this and this. And it kind of realized I don't have to settle. I don't have to kind of pick what, work for issues I don't really care for, even if there is issues I care about. So I think working in that, and I know I had great experience. I met incredible people in the political world, but I think it allowed me to really see what my worldview was and really say, I want to explore it from the issues I care about, not for, what team I'm rooting for, what person I want to win.
I like that. That's beautiful because I remember being in college myself. We're talking about colleges, and I remember someone asking me like what party I'm affiliated with or something, or however, I forget what it was. And I didn't like the whole getting pigeonholed thing. I was like, oh no, well, these guys get me mad, and then those guys get me mad, and everybody gets me mad.
That's right. That's
and,
exactly right.
and what we can do here is like we can go by issues, say like this is no, I'm passionate about this topic, and let's really work to make things better. And that's really, I've mentioned, in our first episode, thank you for joining us on our second, that I'm new to this movement. And so I'm really trying to get to know through this podcast all these different faces and what motivates people. And really that's what I'm seeing quite a bit, is that it's not a loyalty to a party or anything like that. It's no, I really want to fix things. I really want to do something that really helps our country.
Yep, I mean, that's exactly how I feel. And I used to be on that. I'm rooting for a team, but once you see what matters to you, you don't have to settle. I think that so many people feel like, oh, I have to settle for just politics. Where it's like I get to work in a place now where I agree with nearly everything we do, at least 99%. It's like I don't have to work for some things that I'm actively against. So I think it's a really great thing. And just generally SPN and the movement has been just a real blessing for me to be a part of.
I'm glad. I'm glad to hear it. So take me now so you're just getting started in the liberty movement, and what's been your journey to now that you're vice president of communications?
Yeah, and it's a really interesting thing because I mean I first started working in DC. I worked at Coke for 2 years before I came to Beacon. I was so excited because I had worked there, but I actually got to form my own communications department. There was nobody ever at my position before me, so I got to kind of do this in the way I would want it to look. It was interesting because I realized that, I had a lot of great skills, but there's also a lot I didn't realize I didn't know. So that really taught me that, having to form your own communications department, the things that I'm great at and things that said, oh, well, maybe I should have thought more about that. So it was kind of trial by fire. And I really enjoyed that. And, I've done this, I headed up the communications department for about 7.5 years, and I still do. But I was given the opportunity to kind of be on the leadership team and work more in strategy for the overall organization about 1.5 years ago. And it was, and I think that we might talk about it later, but, that was a really nerve-wracking moment for me because I knew how good I was at my current job, but it's really hard to say, well, maybe I'm not going to be as good at this job. I know, there's comfort in knowing that you're good at what you do. But when you take on a new challenge, there's always those question marks. And of course, same as when I took over the communications department, there's been a lot of successes and there's just been some things I just didn't know or, I had to improve on.
Yeah, I was listening to one of your episodes of Overcaffeinated, which is a great listen, y'all. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check it out. And you were saying how the CEO there at the Beacon Center is great in letting you kind of set your own path and be like, this is sink or swim. I'm going to do it on my own merits, or I'm going to fail on my own merits, and that seems to really work well with how you all you don't sink. I can tell you that.
Well, I certainly have sunk in a couple of things, but you're right. I mean, I think that leadership, and you see that it's so important having, Justin and Stephanie lead our team, and they really give you, they give you the autonomy to do the things that you think are right. They let you take chances. I think we'll talk a little bit later about the Beacon poll, but that was a real chance that they trusted me with to take that, many other people in the world have not done. And even a show like, Overcaffeinated, where I'm asking, our current governor, what he thinks about Nickelback. That's a really interesting thing that, a lot of people would not allow you to do. So I am very, very lucky to have the leadership that we do at Beacon because they've allowed me to thrive and they've allowed me to, I'm responsible for what happens. Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't go well and, I have to deal with that, but they want you to chart your own path and they want you to think outside the box and do things that other think tanks don't do.
Yeah. I want to talk about that. So the Beacon poll is a great example of and over caffeinated as well. And what you just mentioned, that example about Nickelback asking the government, I get the sense that you are very motivated by speaking about culture. Like the Beacon poll has a lot about culture, and over caffeinated is talking a lot about culture. And I was recently looking at some demographic data which showed how the traditional centers of culture in the coasts of California and then New York are losing people between the age 25 and 55. Like that, they're less now living there in these centers, these traditionally the center of culture in the country, and they're all going to southern cities. And Tennessee is huge for culture. So I get the sense that you're really picking up on something that's growing right now in your state, like this kind of a center for culture that's the whole country is coming to. Am I overstating it, or do you see that too?
No, that's exactly right. I mean, I think especially Nashville. I mean, Nashville is kind of the cultural center of America at this point, I think, because we're having so many people move from these places, right? And it's not, I think that people have this idea of what the South is and what southern cities are. It's a bunch of, there's always those diatribes, though, these, redneck, they don't have things, but we have everything that these big cities have. And of course, we have different cultural things. We have music here. There's a lot of, I think what's really interesting culturally in the state of Tennessee is kind of how our politics are different. When you talk about traditional Republicans and Democrats that you see on TV arguing in DC, that's not what it looks like here. We have a lot of, our Democrats are much more moderate than you traditionally see outside of these places. So ultimately, I think that culture is such a big part, and I believe that we need to kind of reach people on their own terms. We want to reach people where they're already at, not force them to come over to us. And I think by talking about culture and things that people are living, on a daily basis is the best way for them to understand who we are, what we believe in. No matter what side you're on of the political aisle or what you believe in, there's something that we believe that you also believe. So trying to bring them in and say, hey, let's talk about our commonalities, not our differences.
That makes complete sense. Yeah, I'm really fascinated to hear that so just to make sure that I heard it right. So it seems to you that Nashville is already like the center of culture in the United States. Like, is that right?
Now, I think some people say overstating, but yes, I think it is, because I think that this is a place that has, when you talk about a melting pot, all kinds. We have a lot of diversity racially. We have a lot of diversity politically. We have diversity of where people come from geographically. It kind of is, I think, the new America, where you see all these people living together. You have blue cities in a red state. It's a really interesting, place. I think Nashville really is this place that you're seeing. I think maybe a little bit Charlotte too, but this new culture that America is doing, where the coastal cities don't define what we are as a country, and their culture is not exactly what we are. So I actually think Nashville is at least a good indicator of where we're going.
Yeah, well, something that I've in my own personal circles, I'm always wondering about. There's always centers of art. You look at Paris, you look at London, you look at Rome, you look at Naples, you look at all the different, great centers of art, where there's those meccas, Vienna, for example, and they have their time in the sun, and then there's another center, and they don't go away, but it's just, they're not the same. It's not the same gravitational pull. And so I'm wondering, and with all due respect to New York and California, who had, incredible histories as centers of culture, but you don't maintain that center of pull if you're losing a demographic. If you're losing these demographics, 25 to 55, that's where a lot of energy exists. Especially artists that are creating that people want to watch, or listen or consume their art in some way. So I'm wondering, like, you never know until after the fact. So you might be dead right. It might be that Nashville is that center. But in any case, we're getting off topic. I think it's a fascinating topic. But we should talk. Maybe we'll talk more about that at a later time. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Like, so can you share a specific story where you had an impact, that your organization had an impact that you're really proud of?
Yeah. So here's one thing that I'm going to say as a personal thing that I think I've done that's helped the organization, is that there's so many people, I think, in our movement and just on the right generally, that just talk about how, the media is unfair, the liberal media, they're never going to treat us well. There's no point in even talking to them. I mean, there is literally some think tanks that don't even answer media inquiries, including a friend of mine who runs a think tank. I won't say that they don't answer. And, ultimately, I think one of the biggest accomplishments that, I have done with our comms team and with our CEO and the EVP are that I think that the way that we are discussed and talked about by the media is one of the greatest triumphs where, we're not seen as this crazy right wing organization that just wants the worst for everybody because I've formed these relationships with the people doing that. And ultimately, we don't call people names and we don't question their motives. That's one of the rules of Beacon. It doesn't matter where they're at politically. We just don't do that. So the way that we can I think we can really reach new audiences, maybe in a way that other places can't, because they're so focused on this kind of like the us versus them mentality. If you don't agree with us, F off or whatever it is. And that's not how we believe. That's not how we deal with it. So I think the way that even when, we might be fighting for something that a member of the media disagrees with, they'll say, well, we don't agree with this, but we know that they have principles and we know they're standing up for what they believe in and being consistent. And I think that matters so much in today's day and age where you have everyone going after each other. It's such, I think the polarization of America is just horrible right now. And I hate the idea that it's not like it used to be where you can talk to a neighbor or a friend who's on the other side of the aisle as you and, have a great friendship, have a great conversation and, be able to talk about these things in a friendly and respectful way. And we've lost that. And I think that, Beacon, one of the things we want to do is we want to bridge that gap. We want people to be able to talk to us and we want people who disagree with us to be able to say, I disagree with you, but I know that your motives are right. I want to hear what you have to say about it because I really do believe that you're coming at it from the right perspective, even if, in my opinion, you have the wrong answer.
So what the impact is that you see is that people look to you to actually like speak not dogmatically, not members of a specific tribe, but like as individuals. So there's an ability to kind of reach on either side, and people will, I guess if I'm going to state it, the impact is that people listen. They don't tune you out immediately. Is that right?
I think it's credibility. I think it comes down to credibility that people view us as credible, even who only agree with us 10% of the time or 20% of the time, because of what we've done, because of our policy research, because of the way that we're led, as the way that we treat legislators, the way that we treat people who disagree with us, and the fact that I want to kind of focus on the fact that we're so transparent. We want to be transparent about what we do, and that we don't have oh, this donor paid for this, so that's why they're doing this. That's never the case. We decide our own policy issues. It's because we want the people of Tennessee to have the best life possible, and all people, not just people on one side of the aisle. And I think, ultimately, after years of working through that, talking to media members, and just seeing the results of what we do, I think almost everybody in Tennessee would tell you, well, whether I like them or not on policy wise, I do believe that they're authentic. And I believe that they are looking out for Tennesseans, even if we disagree, and kind of being that source that, when people agree with us, that they will tweet out about our thing, even if they like, oh, I hate them on 90% of the thing, that their view on zoning, I agree with. And I think that they're coming at it from the right perspective.
That's huge. Congratulations on that. That's wonderful.
Well, thank you. At least that's my view. Maybe other people disagree, but that's my opinion.
Sure. Hey, we're talking to you to get your opinion. So thank you for it. But let's look on the opposite side. So what are some challenges you've had in your leadership journey, and how have you risen to meet that challenge?
Yeah, I think that the biggest challenge, and I think a lot of people deal with this, is, sometimes you just have imposter syndrome, right? You kind of look at what you have done and you say, oh, look, I've done all those things, but can I replicate that? Can I do that again? Was that just kind of one lucky thing that I did that I'm making my whole career out of? And then it becomes even harder when you're saying, well, I'm moving from a comfortable spot of heading the communications department where I basically know most things. It's a lot of the same type of thing each year, and I know I'm good at that, to a new role where, there's just, I think the imposter syndrome kicks in even more because you're like, I don't know if I can do this. It's Justin putting too much trust in me because I'm good at one thing. So I think personally, that's something that, and every time you do something, you struggle with it. When we did this poll, I'll tell you what, I had about a month straight of like, is this not going to turn out well? Did I put all this time and energy into this for this project that, isn't going to be picked up by the media, isn't going to be respected? Is there going to be mistakes? It's just, I think from my perspective, it's when you take on these new projects and new things that you haven't done before and just thinking, am I the person for this? And the honest answer is sometimes the answer is no, and that's why I try to talk to as many people as I possibly can who know what they're doing first. Because that, and I know that your first episode, you talked to Brooke Medina. They are the only, I think, SPN think tank that has done polling. I made sure to reach out to her 5 or 6 times. We had a whole call to get some, insight from her because they are the only ones who have done this successfully. So, I think that in some ways it's good to have that feeling of like, can I do this myself? Maybe I can't, because you get all the information you possibly need on the front end. And then when you're doing, it's like, I'm either going to sink or swim, but I did everything I possibly could have on the front end to make sure I'm as successful as possible.
Yeah, you do your homework. You show up, and then, you lay it out on the line, and you were incredibly successful. But let's talk more about that later. I want to hear a lot about the impact that personally you had on you, because I was listening to Overcaffeinated, and I had a lot of questions about like what was going on. But we'll come back to that. So tell me a little bit more about some of the inspirations that you have that keep you going. Is it just the Utah Jazz having a winning record and winning the conference? Is that what besides the Utah Jazz? What inspiration?
I win a lot of money if they win the conference this year. I'll tell you that. But no. I think truly the inspiration that I have on a day-to-day basis is really our heroes, the people whose lives we have helped. When you look at, you can say, oh, it's just a press release, or you're just doing a media interview, or you're just doing talking points. Those things don't really seem that important on its face. But when you see what the actual end game is and the impact on, these people's livelihoods, people who couldn't cut hair, that was their whole business, who went, who spent thousands of dollars to do this thing and they're not allowed to do it because the state tells them no, who can't do African hair braiding, even though they're the ones who literally wrote the book on that because of a ridiculous license, right? Who can't record music in their home studio they work for. Those are the people that inspire me, because it's easy for everyone to say, you know what, this doesn't matter that much. Whether, this press release is good or great isn't that important. Whether I do great on this interview isn't that important. Whether this policy brief is interesting isn't that important. But when you look at all those things combined and see the people that we're actually helping, that's where the inspiration comes. And that's one thing that our CEO, Justin, always, tries to hammer into this. It says, don't, every day, don't, loaf, or don't say, oh, I'm kind of half, whatever, I'm not doing the job as fully as I can, because these are the people you're hurting. You're not hurting Beacon. You're not hurting yourself. You're hurting the very people that we're here to protect. And we want to protect every Tennessean's rights. So I think sometimes when you get, frustrated or you get down about something, that's what you need to think of, because that is what inspires you to do better. It's not, oh, I want to make more money. Of course, I want to make more money, but that's not the inspiration for it. The inspiration is these people, we are literally changing their lives. That matters. And when you hear these individual stories and get to know the people, that we've worked with on a one-on-one basis, and become friends with them, that's who you care about. And that's whose life you want to make better. So I think that, every time I get down, which happens a little bit more often than I'd like, those people are the ones who bring me back to life, if that makes sense.
That's beautiful. I'm so glad that you have that inspiration to drive you and keep you going. Tell me about this. So we're talking about the people of your state now. What are the biggest challenges that you see facing Tennessee in the future, and maybe now and then into the future?
Yeah, I think I might have a different answer than a lot of people here, but it's kind of what I mentioned earlier. I think the political polarization is such a big problem, because just like I said, I don't think that we can talk to our neighbor. I don't think we have these civil discussions like we used to have. And I think, when you're not able to talk about it, there's times where you get extremes in both directions. People might say, oh, Nashville they're passing these crazy extreme things to the left. And other people might say, oh, well, the state legislature is passing these crazy extreme things to the right. And ultimately, I think that having those discussions is just something that I am usually an optimistic person, but it feels like something from days gone by. And I think it's a shame, because I think working together is kind of how we get the best things. And ultimately, taking people at their word, because when we talk about this, me and Bernie Sanders, probably very little in common, maybe corporate welfare, but that's it. But the thing is that we agree on almost all of the problems in America, right? And that matters. Just because our solutions are different, I think being able to say, hey, we know that these problems are the same. Let's talk. I think maybe your issue doesn't work. Maybe you think my issue doesn't work, but we ultimately want the same thing for society, right? And it's like, how do we get there? Is it more government or less government? And I think just kind of I think that's really maybe brought down America more than just Tennessee. But I mean, we see this in Tennessee too. And I think that until that is solved, which I mean, to me feels like an issue that's been really, really amplified in the past 15 or so years, I think it will allow us to work together. And I think it'll allow us to not be so polarized. Poll after poll shows, people don't want to be friends with Democrats, or don't want to be friends with Republicans, or, would break up with somebody or not date somebody there. And I just think that that's really problematic societally.
Okay. Well, I think things like this and people like you are what the solutions we need, and the network, working across the partisan divides, so that people actually listen. So I'm glad that we have people like you focusing on that, and let's work on it together. But you spoke about polls. So let's talk about the Beacon poll. I was listening to Overcaffeinated, and it was the episode that dropped right, I think, a few days after, or it was a week after the poll released. And you and your co-host were saying that how you felt physically ill from all of the strain and the pressure and everything else. It was your poll was humongously successful. You had Trump, putting a press release about it, and everyone was quoting it. I think the stat was it was $3 million of earned publicity. So congratulations on that. But tell me, what was it like that caused, I want to know the human toll behind this success. So what brought on that toil that was in both y'all's eyes?
Yeah, I mean, almost no sleep for about 2 weeks. But I think it's the idea of you wanting it to be perfect. And, we're not a huge think tank. We have think tanks in the network that 80, 90, 100 people. I mean, we have 11 people on our staff, and only, really just me and Taylor worked on it internally. So there's 2 people, but it's such a big deal. And like I talked about, something that really matters to me is Beacon's credibility. So we want to make sure that every single thing is perfect with this poll, right? Because this is something that, you can't get back the first time, the first impression. And this is such a big deal, because we want this to be something that people in the state and nationally look towards for years to come, to see where people are at in the state, what they're thinking, what matters to them. And, you lose a lot of credibility if you have, numbers that are off, numbers that don't match up between, the graphics you do and the actual poll, making sure that the polling and the questions are fair and that they're balanced and they're not leaning one way or the other. So really I texted myself about 3 or 4 a.m. every single night, hey, don't forget to check this for tomorrow, because when this first poll came out, I mean, hopefully it'll get easier from here, but this is everything that we've worked for. And, even though you only see this poll and this page and these graphics, I mean, this is 6 months in the making, and really 5 years if you talk about the first time I brought it up as something we should do. So it was kind of one of the first projects that's been kind of my baby, that has been specifically something I've done. And nobody's really, Justin and Stephanie, like I said, they're great. They kind of looked over, helped with the questions a little bit, but at that point, this is your thing. So I just felt a lot of pressure to, make them proud, but not just make them proud, but like I said, make people see us as this excellent poll. And, you spend 2 or 3 weeks basically working, 100 hours a week. And then the day the poll releases, just the most, fulfilling thing I think I maybe have ever experienced, seeing these media hits come through, seeing, Brett Baer and Fox News asking Ron DeSantis about the Beacon poll, literally citing the Beacon poll, seeing people from all over the political spectrum citing it. And we have, a cool video of just these television hosts. I think there's 5 or 6 of them who, may or may not agree with our policy, saying no matter where you stand, this is an absolutely legitimate poll. 11, they talked about the legitimacy of the poll. So I will tell you that Thursday and Friday, after, expecting things to go wrong, expecting us to be working on stuff, that was truly 2 of the most fulfilling days I've ever had at Beacon, just seeing the fruits of your labor come through. And, I really have to give, outside of all the work I did, Taylor, who designed the whole website, did an incredible amount of work, and everyone from Beacon. And like I said, having our CEO and EVP, approve me doing this really risky thing that I think, like I said, only one other think tank does. It was a real, it was just a scary situation, but we're so happy it turned out well. And, being cited from a former president it's just something you don't expect to happen when you do that. And you always kind of have the worst scenario, what if this doesn't work? What if nobody cares? And it was really great. And it just shows you that when you put a lot of work and you pay attention to the details, it's really tough at the time, but when you see the fruits of your labor, it's all worth it. I mean, I imagine that's what being a parent's like. I don't know. You might have better insight on that than I do, but I don't know about that. But it feels like that's kind of the same type of thing. You deal with a lot of stuff with your kids. You stay up at night, throwing up, they can't sleep, but then you see them as adults like this was all worth it.
Well, I see we have three under three, so I can
So you're in the hard part
yeah,
now.
I can speak directly when you said staying up all night. I was like, I know that. But I want to say I want to get a really clear. So it was 6 months that you were really like in the trenches working on it, and then was it like a 2 week sprint for 100 hours a week there at the end? Is that how it worked?
Well, yeah. So what happened was, I mean, we came up with questions. It was really important. I was always updating that, making sure that we had a website ready. That was kind of the first 3 or 4 months. And then
Okay,
our pollster put the numbers in the field. So, we had about 2 weeks where we didn't know what was happening. He
got
was
it,
putting numbers in the field. He was updating us once in a while, but we didn't see them.
got it.
And then, right about 2 weeks before our polls released, we got the final results from him. And that's where we had to make every graphic, check every number, come up with a press release. I had to go through the poll. I read the poll probably 100 times because I need to make sure when I'm being interviewed on television, I know what the poll says. I
Yeah,
know what percentage of people in East Tennessee,
right.
prefer Robert F. Kennedy to Joe Biden in a primary. I need to know, education savings accounts for people from 18 to 29, what they think of that.
Yeah,
So I think that was just a lot there because, again, it's the credibility piece matters so much. So it was just making sure the rollout was perfect. And, truthfully, I can't, Brooke Medina, who helped me so much in the front end, and she said that, that one of the biggest compliments I've ever gotten was, I mean, they've been doing it for 20 years. And she said that they want to take some of the things from what we did and wrap it into their poll. So I feel like there was no bigger compliment than that from, somebody who I respect so much, who, their success is what gave me the idea that we could do this.
right, right. And you probably also like you've never done a poll before, and so
Never.
you were able to probably compare notes with what they had done and then be able to implement that for your own state in your own way. That's I am so gratified to hear that that's happening. Like the network is helping each other and
Oh,
cohesively creating more than what each could do apart. That's incredibly gratifying to hear. And congratulations on that success. How do you feel now? Have you started to recuperate? No.
I have. And the thing is, we had October for our next poll. So you only got a couple of weeks off and you got to start working the next questions. But I do think the cool thing about it, too, is a lot of people don't understand, like, why are you polling? Like, do you care about Trump versus DeSantis? The answer is no. From a policy perspective, we don't care about that. But there's a lot of issues we do care about. And, like I said about people, you have to meet the media where they are.
Yeah.
They care about that. And,
Right.
I might care about it personally, but when we want to talk about ESAs, if you just do an ESA poll, they're not going to care. They do care when you say, what percentage of people stop drinking Bud Light? That matters to them, because that's what's in the media. But meeting them where they are to talk about, I guess, in lack of better terms, the issues that really matter to everyday people. And that's the way to get them out there is by using, things like that. So we even had, donors and people there saying, you guys don't get involved in politics. Why do you care about that? The answer is, well, we don't necessarily care, but a lot of people care about it. And, to get the issues that we care in front of them, that's something we need to show them. And it's an interesting facet. And as a private citizen, I really care about those numbers.
Yeah, well, it's part of being a part of your state and not living, apart from everyone, but actually being alongside everyone else in Tennessee, caring about what they care about. And that makes complete sense to me. Okay. Well, speaking of caring, what are your future hopes and goals there at the Beacon?
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, if I'm being honest, like my goal is for Beacon Center to be the most successful think tank in the whole country. I want to be thought of not just as, a regional Tennessee think tank, but a think tank that, has done these things that other think tanks emulate, that we can help other think tanks do, where things that we do in our state, we can spread to other states, and get national recognition for what we're doing. Because ultimately, if one of our think tanks is strong, that makes our whole network stronger. So that's one of the cool things. It's like almost the positive competition. You see somebody like Goldwater doing something great, like Right to Try on a national level, or Mackinac, working on workers' rights. And you see all these think tanks doing these great things. And ultimately, if Beacon's stronger, so is our entire movement and every single thing that we care about. So it's kind of like the rising tide lifts all boats approach, kind of what I believe in. And, I just want bacon because ultimately Tennessee matters the most to me, because these are the people that my neighbors, the people I live with. I want every citizen to have, the absolute best life possible, with the government not intruding on that. But it's not just Tennessee, every single person in the US and ultimately every single person across the world that I want to have the best life possible. So I think if we're successful in a lot of things that we work on, and even if we don't get the recognition for it nationally, it doesn't matter. It's about that, these policies that we care about, that we think make people's lives better and allow everyone to live their version of the American dream. I think that's the goal. And it's like for these policies that aren't, right or left necessarily, but these policies to be implemented that really help people's lives, when the issues people care about the most. Can I pay my mortgage this month? Right. I mean, how do I put food on the table? That's what matters to people, but as much as people talk about it, critical race theory is probably not the most important thing to a lot of people. Right. What the, trans things. I mean, and I know it matters, but like the kitchen table issues that matter the most, we want to make people's lives easier. And through doing everything that we can in Tennessee and the rest of that, we're doing everything they can in their states. I just think we're making the country a better place.
I agree. I'm glad. I'm very glad for it. So thank you for all the hard work.
Well, thank you. Thank you for letting me showcase it.
Oh, absolutely. It's my pleasure. One last question for you. Who else should we interview here on Neighbors in the Network? One nomination.
You took my first one, so that's tough. I have to do a backup now.
Yeah. So before we started recording, folks, I mentioned that we interviewed Brooke Medina last week, and poor Mark was like, "Oh, that was my nomination." So we put him on the spot.
So she's a rock star. So my next choice is, I think, Garrett Ballingy, the CEO in West Virginia. He's got an incredible story, and I think it's really interesting because he actually started his own think tank. I used to work with him back in my days in DC, and seeing the way that he has made Cardinal what it is today. It's been just incredible hard work. He has a great personal story, a wonderful wife. I mean, he's one of the best people, and somebody who truly, you want to talk about somebody I emulate. Garrett is somebody who I look up to and say, I want to be more like that guy. So I think he's a great person to interview.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. Well, for everyone here at the network at SPN, I want to thank you again, Mark.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
It's our pleasure. And we'll see you all next time on Neighbors in the Network.
Thanks for listening to Neighbors in the Network, an offering from the State Policy Network. We hope that this podcast can serve as a place for empathy, understanding, and human connection. Please let us know about your thoughts in the comments section. And thanks again.